friends, welcome back. We're doing some social studies again today. Now, in the last couple of lessons, we have been talking about folk tales. And our folk tales, we have studied two sets of similar stories. In our first set of stories, we had some main characters who were treated very poorly, but they were rewarded for their goodness. So our first story we read was Cinderella, and it took place in France. And then we read The Girl with the Red Slippers, which took place in Egypt. And then we read Billy Beg, which took place in Ireland. Then our next set of folk tales were about people who were very tiny, about as big as our thumb. And our first story we read was Tom Thumb. And Tom Thumb originated in England. Thumbelina originated in Denmark. And Isun Boshi originated in Japan. Well, today we're going to read another set of stories. This is the start of our next set of folk tales. And this folk tale today is Little Red Riding Hood. And you have probably heard Little Red Riding Hood before. But today's story has been told around the world for hundreds of years. And it originated in Germany by two German brothers, and their names were Jacob and William Grimm. So let's talk about what we need to know before we read our story, and then we'll get started with our story, okay? So let's look at our vocabulary, and we'll look at our map too, and we'll see where exactly Germany is, okay? So let's share my screen here. All right, today we're doing Little Red Riding Hood. We just talked about all that. All right, so let's look at our vocabulary words. These are words that we're going to hear in our story that we may not know what they mean. So let's listen. Cherished. It means to be cared about something dearly or value something. The farmer perished the goose's golden eggs. Disguised. Clothes or other things that you wear so people will not recognize you. The turkey put on a disguise so that the farmer wouldn't recognize him. Grateful. Feeling or showing thanks. Molly was so grateful when a kind stranger found her puppy. Sly means to be sneaky or secretive. The sly fox tried to trick the hens. Okay, so let's look at our world map. Ooh, excuse me. Pardon me. Today we are going to be in Germany. Remember, here's Germany, and it is in the continent of Europe. We are all the way over here in North America. See, we're somewhere around this area right here. So we'd have to fly all the way across the ocean to get to Germany. So our last story we read was in Japan. And today we're all the way over here in Germany. So let's get started. All right. Get my page turned here. Once there was a sweet little girl who was loved by all who knew her, but most of all by her grandmother, who could not do enough for her. Once the grandmother sent the girl a cloak with a red velvet hood. The little girl was so pleased with the cloak that she cherished it and wore it every day. Remember, that means she loved it. So she came to be known as Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother said to her, "Little Red Riding Hood, your grandmother is feeling sick. I would like you to go and visit her. Take her some of the cakes we baked yesterday. They will do her good. Go quickly before it gets too warm, but remember to stay on the path and do not stop along the way." So what did her mother tell her to do? Stay on the path and do not stop along the way. "I will do just as you say, Mother," promised Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood started on her way. Her grandmother lived in a house in the woods, a half-hour's walk from the village. Little Red Riding Hood had only just entered the wood when she came upon a wolf. The wolf longed to eat Little Red Riding Hood for lunch, but Little Red Riding Hood did not know what a wicked animal he was, so she was not afraid of him. So the wolf's intentions are bad, but does Little Red Riding Hood know that? She thinks he's a good person because she doesn't know any better yet. All right, let's keep reading. Oops. Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood, said the fox. Good morning, Wolf, she answered kindly. And where are you going so early? He asked. To my granny's house. And what's in your basket? Some cakes we baked yesterday. Grandmother is sick, and the cakes will make her feel better. And where does your grandmother live? Why do you think the wolf is asking Little Red Riding Hood so many questions? Getting sneaky, isn't he? In the woods, a short distance from here, in a cottage under 3 big oak trees, said Little Red Riding Hood. Said the wolf as he thought to himself, what a tasty morsel this little girl would be. She's not big enough for a meal. I must find a way to eat her and her grandmother too. Okay, so far we've met Little Red Riding Hood, her mother, and the wolf. Where's Little Red Riding Hood going? She's going to grandmother's house because grandmother's sick and she's bringing her some food. What does that wolf want to do? He wants to eat Little Red Riding Hood for lunch, and now he wants to eat Grandma also. Oh boy, here we go. The wolf walked along beside Little Red Riding Hood for a while. Then he said, why, look at all the pretty flowers. Why don't you stop to rest and pick some of them? You're hurrying along as if you were late for school. Yet the birds are singing and everything is so pleasant here in the woods. Little Red Riding Hood looked up and saw the sunlight dancing in the leaves of the trees. She saw the lovely flowers around her and she thought, I'm sure grandmother would be pleased if I took her a bunch of fresh flowers. Forgetting what she promised her mother, she left the path and went on her way into the woods to pick some flowers. Oh boy. So she's leaving the path, but Mom said, don't leave that path. Go straight to Grandma's house. Oh boy. Each time she picked one, she saw others even prettier further on, and so she strayed deeper and deeper into the woods. Remember, strayed means to get away from the place where you should be. Oops, wrong way, sorry. As for the wolf, he hurried straight to grandmother's cottage and knocked on the door. Who's there? Said a little voice. It is I, Little Red Riding Hood, said the wolf, trying to sound like a little girl. Oh, lift the latch and let yourself in, dear, said the old woman. I'm too weak to get out of bed. The wolf lifted the latch and swung open the door. Before grandmother could realize what was happening, the wolf gobbled her up in one mouthful. Dun, dun, dun. Then the sly wolf dressed himself in her nightgown and nightcap. With a wicked grin, he got into bed and pulled up the covers. It was quite the disguise. Oh boy. Why do you think the wolf is dressing like Grandma? Yeah, he's trying to trick Little Red Riding Hood and make her think that that's really Grandma so he could eat her. Why would you describe him being sly? Because he's being sneaky, isn't he? He's being sneaky. He's dressing like Grandma so he can trick her. Meanwhile, Little Red Riding Hood had picked all the flowers she could carry and found her way back to the path. She walked on quickly until she came to grandmother's house. She was surprised to find the door open, and as she stepped inside, she felt very strange. Oh dear, she said to herself, this morning I was so glad to be going to see my grandmother. Why do I feel so frightened now? Do you ever feel like frightened all of a sudden? What do you think your body is telling you? I think her body's telling her right now. You think her body's telling her there might be some danger coming up? I don't know. Let's see. She took a deep breath and called out, Good morning, grandmother. But there was no answer. She went up to the bed. There she saw her grandmother, or so she thought. The wolf had pulled the covers up under his chin and pulled the nightcap down to his eyes. Little Red Riding Hood thought her grandmother looked very strange indeed. Oh, "Oh, Granny," she said, "what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my dear," said the wolf. Said Little Red Riding Hood. "Granny must be very sick indeed, for her voice is much deeper than it used to be. And Granny, what big eyes you have." "The better to see you with, my dear." "And Grandmother, what big teeth you have." "The better to eat you," cried the wolf as he sprang out of the bed and swallowed Little Red Riding Hood up in one big gulp. After his meal, the wolf was feeling stuffed. He lay down on the bed and went to sleep, and began to snore very loudly. A hunter who was passing by the cottage heard the snoring. "My," he thought, "the old woman sounds terrible. I better look inside and check on her." The hunter walked inside and saw the wolf. He instantly noticed the wolf's big belly and realized that the wolf had eaten the old woman. He knew he had to set her free. The hunter set them free, and out jumped Little Red Riding Hood and Granny. "Oh, I'm so grateful you saved us," said Little Red Riding Hood. Granny, too, thanked the hunter for his kindness. When the wolf woke up, he was so shocked to see all the people standing before him that he ran away and had never been seen again. Little Red Riding Hood sat down with her grandmother and the hunter, and together they ate the cakes. Excuse me. The cakes that Little Red Riding Hood had brought. And Little Red Riding Hood said to herself, "After this, I shall always do as my mother tells me, and shall never leave the path again, not even to pick pretty flowers." So what lesson did Little Red Riding Hood learn? I think that she learned to always listen to her mother and follow directions. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to ask you some questions about our story. All right, so let's talk about our story today. Why was the main character called Little Red Riding Hood? Yeah, she was always wearing a cloak with red velvet hood that her grandmother made her. What were the instructions that her mother gave to Little Red Riding Hood? To stay on that path and not stop along the way. Did she listen to her mother? What does she do instead? She leaves that path and she goes to pick flowers, doesn't she? She didn't listen. Goodness. Why does the wolf tell Little Red Riding Hood to go pick the flowers? Yeah, he wants to get a head start. He wants to get to grandmother's house so he can eat grandmother, so he can be pretending to be grandma when Little Red Riding Hood arrives. All right, so what did the wolf do to grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood? He ate them. He ate both of them. And how does the hunter save grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood? Or I'm sorry, how does he discover that they need to be saved? He hears grandma snoring and he thinks, that doesn't sound very good, does it? So he goes to check on her. Then he sees that the wolf has eaten them. And then he frees them. Okay, your job today is going to be answering some questions in your Google Classroom assignment about the story we just read, okay? Now, we've gone over all these questions, so there should be no reason you don't know the answers unless you didn't listen to the story. So make sure you listen to the story, go in and answer the questions in Google Classroom for the assignment, and then turn it into me, okay? And I'll see you guys on the next lesson. Bye!